We believe that sexuality is shaped by social structures. The institutions that we have built are involved in the way we try to eliminate the threat of shifting the way we look at sexuality. Schools and media have a greater influence on people and have defined the way sexuality is viewed and taught within our society.
Wounded truths are influenced by the world through culture, society, and social groups. There are 4 questions dealing with truth-telling. The first being who can tell the truth. We consider whoever to be in charge at the moment right, that being teachers, youth organizations, or queer organizations. About what is the second question, and an example would be the teachings of homosexuality in schools. Some people are more focused on the teaching of safe sex, and others are focused on how homosexuality is being taught. There is a fear that it would be taught as a pleasurable thing. The last 2 questions are what consequences and with what relations of power. The consequences that come with this is that some see it as a form to reduce school violence, while others see it as teachings of HIV and AIDS, and the safety of same-sex sex. Power is tied to actions, and it is believed that some actions would lead to other actions, changing the way truths are being told.
Even the law commented and said that it was illegal to teach about same-sex sexual practices. Because of this, young adults identifying as homosexual have a higher risk of committing suicide, doing drugs, or being murdered. Without the teachings of homosexuality, people are not able to embrace their identity and will continue to struggle.
Sexuality is taught to teenagers in different ways. One of the ways that it is taught is from people's experiences during middle school and high school. Many people mention how bullies would label them a specific sexuality based on how they appeared and behaved. Sex education was taught at a majority of schools, but was not a reliable form of education because schools only emphasized on abstinence and nothing else. As teenage pregnancy increased significantly at this time, so did STDs.
Schools have tried to promote heterosexuality as something that is normal and respectable. Our schools in America have what is called a hegemonic curriculum. This is saying that schools legitimize the dominant culture being heterosexuality and marginalize or reject other cultures, in this case being everything other than heterosexuality. Heterosexuality is enforced silently and overtly in the culture of most schools by the way the environment is set up. The behavior around students is intense and practiced by everyone in the school at certain events and activities. You learn what the acceptable way of behaving is through your administrators and peers. This has become a behavior which means it becomes the standard to America.
Heterosexual acts that students display, showing affection for the opposite sex or making anti-gay jokes, is the norm. This is maintained through interactions between students and staff. In high school, people of the LGBTQ community are taught to not express themselves. Meanwhile, heterosexual students are encouraged to. Sexual education in schools teach abstinence because they don't want young adults having out-of-control sex. So instead, they try to take control and eliminate sexual discussions in school. This reinforces a heteronormative culture that is forced upon students.
Sexuality has its own policies and rules within all of this set forth by both deliberate and incidental conflicts of interest. During the 19th century, in England and the United States, there were many educational and political campaigns to promote chastity, get rid of prostitution, and lastly to stop people who are classified as young from masturbating. People known as morality crusaders attacked literature, nude paintings, music, abortion, and even dancing in public. During this time, parents would tie down their children to prevent them from touching themselves at night. It has been very clear that society has an issue with children performing these actions, and a sex law was even created. Child pornography has also become an issue, and it's more than sexual behavior. It includes sexual material being taught in schools. Some teachers have lost their jobs for child pornography material being used in their classrooms. A professor got fired for using a photo of her 7-year-old masturbating in her classroom.
The HPV vaccine in male circumcision was designed to protect sexual health. It works better if you do these treatments on children. We try to use a lot of prevention methods on children because it would be more difficult to get adults to conform. This drug was mandated, and in return, there were questions about how it affected female promiscuity, whereas circumcision in males doesn't. The increase in infant circumcision is at 90%. This increase was so huge because it was believed to prevent STIs from happening. In Africa, circumcision has been seen to prevent against HIV and AIDS. It was estimated that 62% of men in Africa are circumcised.
In order for people to understand what a sexual act is, there has to be some sort of rule book in place that the people who are participating have to follow. The learning process of what to feel during sex is the same as what they learn to do when it takes place. If you don't have the proper elements of what is defined in sexual scripts, such as two people who want to engage in sexual activities, the actions leading up to intercourse, such as going out on a date or any other form of courtmanship, then nothing involving intercourse will happen. This is commonly shown throughout different media outlets.
The lessons children learn about sexuality from G-rated films are compelling to children because of the colors and constant action. Hetero-romantic love is popularly developed into these movies. In The Little Mermaid, Ariel and the human Eric develop a romantic relationship throughout the movie. Other films like Beauty and the Beast have the same concept. For some movies, like Toy Story, the plot might not be directly about hetero-romantic relationships, but the concept is still touched. Children learn that hetero-romantic relationships are magical because in films, love and romance is in the form of flowers, music, extravagant clothing, etc. This is a problem because we indirectly teach a population we don't consider sexual about sexuality, while also inaccurately portraying real-life situations.
By having the children rewatch these films, they are then able to catch new adult messages that they may have not caught onto before. Majority of princess films always include a man saving the princess, and by the end of the film, the princess is married to the man and they live happily ever after. These are fairy tales that young girls look up to because they believe that they need a man in their life to be complete.
Sexuality in the media is changing. It has changed women from being passive and limited to erotic and outward. We're used to women being sexualized in the media. The male body has now been able to be sexualized in the media where they use a non-feminine man who has a perfect body with a six-pack to seduce a woman into buying something. The media makes sure to include a beautiful thin white woman that can demonstrate some power of her sexuality. Although gay men are represented in the media, they are more hidden and only represented for things such as fashion inspirations. And lastly, we have lesbians, who are just completely sexualized and only seen as entertainment for men. The ideas that we have stated on schools and media, with both of them having a greater influence on people, is why we believe that sexuality is strongly shaped by social structures.